Hello, Kalpana. Very hearty welcome to Kalpana, who is a well-known academic and a women's writer and activist in her own right, and who works at the IIT Madras. However, today we will be talking to her not in the capacity of an academic necessarily, but of a writer, uh, of a very interesting book, a book that she wrote about her grandmother. And what makes this whole exercise so curious is that when I read that you set out to actually write a book on your mother, who is a renowned social activist, Communist Party member, who fought for the right of the poor, the oppressed, and you set out to write her biography, but you changed your mind. And instead, you ended up writing about your grandmother, who was not a social activist of this brand. However, she was a silent rebel who did her bit to kind of do within her microcosm of existence things to oppose, let me put it this way, the patriarchal Tamil Brahmin community and its orthodoxy during the interwar years, during the years when India was struggling for her independence. And here was this young girl who was trapped in matrimony, according to her own words, in a loveless marriage or little love marriage, if I may put it accurately. And here she was trying to get her own freedom, for her own self-actualization, for her own independence. And it's a beautiful book to the extent that there is this, the individual's destiny, freedom fight. On the other hand, the nation's struggle. It beautifully bookmarks the events. So what made you actually change your mind and write about your grandmother?
Thank you, Sreemathi, for that lovely introduction to me and to the book. And I'm happy to be speaking about a piece of writing, I must say at the outset, that has brought me far more pleasure and joy and meaning and purpose and fulfillment than academic writing has ever done. And I've been an academic for 15 years. And before that, I did a PhD. So believe me, I know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And if there are academics here, a big shout out to you. If you, when you realize you have to get back to writing a paper, but you just then realize you have to make yourself another cup of coffee, right? And unlike this piece of writing, where I would actually wake up in the morning with a spring in my step, looking forward to the writing. So an opportunity.
I have to interrupt you here. There's an interesting detail about how she started writing the book. I read that she stumbled on a wooden box with her name on it.
Yeah.
Tell us about the wooden box. What
I'll get to the wooden box in a bit. But for those who are wondering what is the reference to, the person that Sreemathi mentioned, who is Maithili Sivaraman, I'll answer your first question first, which is that, yes, this is a book on the life of my maternal grandmother, born in the year 1911. Pankajam is her name. And as Sreemathi points out, I didn't set out to write the book. That was not my intention. It was entirely accidental. It was not intentional. My intention was to write about my mother, who was a well-known, well-respected, very well-loved figure, public person, an activist, a leader, a trade unionist, a women's movement leader in Tamil Nadu, well-known in other parts of India as well. So I'm just going to use this opportunity also to... Are the slides switched on? I can't see it from here. Is it on? Okay, so yeah. This is, because I can't see it, I'm doing this thing because I can't see it, yeah. So this is Maithili. This was Maithili when she was about 29 years old, just a week after the infamous massacre, the gruesome massacre of Kirvanmani in Tanjavur district. When women and children, largely from Dalit agricultural laborer households, were brutally burnt alive. Maithili wrote about this, got involved with the Kisan movement and the Communist Party of India, Marxist, following this. And here is, I call this picture, spot the woman in the photo if you can. And if you can't, she's in the bottom left, second from left in the bottom corner, right? In a world, in a sea of men, right? In a world of men, that was the trade union movement. She was a woman who shone bright. And here again, Maithili from one of her many, many street protests in the 1990s, and Maithili also in the this period. So, yes, so clearly Sreemathi, I wanted to write about Maithili because she was a woman of consequence, right? And that's when I stumbled upon a wooden box in my house looking for material on my mother, right? And this box contained writings of my grandmother Pankajam, Maithili's mother Pankajam, which blew me away. So I'm just going to show you a picture of the wooden box. Here is the box. Pankajam is Maithili's mother, born 1911, passed away in 2007. It seems to be a small box, but it contained a treasure trove so far as I was concerned. Because in this box, I found that my grandmother Pankajam had been writing her life story, her autobiography, which she began to write in the year 1939. She was about 38 years or so at that point of time. She wrote for about 5 decades. The last piece of writing was in 1995. She wrote it all in English, in bits and pieces, so it wasn't a linear, structured, straightforward narrative. Largely in the school essay notebooks of her children, and then later when we all arrived, of her grandchildren. So suddenly I would find my maths graph sheets filled with her stories. I was like, what happened? No wonder it was missing then. So, and then I realized that she had written and told us the story of her life and her times. I think it's in the course of that I realized that something extraordinary was happening, that somebody I had taken for granted was a very unusual, extraordinary woman. Over to you, Sreemathi.
So, very interesting, very exciting. And I must say, Maithili Sivaraman, apart from being an activist, she wrote about her mother.
That's her grandmother.
Her grandmother, Subbulakshmi. And now we have Kalpana writing about her grandmother, which is amazing. What really surprised me is that here is a woman who was a rebel in her own, capacity, but and she raised 2 strong women, and one woman to take on the whole, community, which was not treating everybody fairly, become an official Communist Party member, be active internationally, and the other raised into a sensitive academic writer. So she is surely no woman of no consequence, but a woman of great consequence, because obviously if she can provide an incubator at home to let your minds germinate ideas of leadership and accountability and agency, she is definitely a woman of substance rather than a woman of no consequence. So what made you actually choose this title?
Yeah, and that's a question I can't duck. I have to explain the title of the book. And just before I do that, let me also show you who is this woman of no consequence / consequence. Yeah, this is, if you can see this picture, I can barely see it from where I am. Yeah, so yeah, there's Pankajam in the white dress. She's a little girl. She must have been about 4.5 in that picture. She's the one in the white dress, and her mother, Subbulakshmi, is in the extreme right corner of this picture. Next to Pankajam is the baby brother who died after a couple of years. So that's just to show you who is the subject of my book. Here, Pankajam again in 1916, in the early 1930s, and then in 1987, the subject of my book. So why do I call her a woman of no consequence? For that, I'm just going to very quickly take you to this slide, which is not moving. What's happening? Okay, I think I am. Hello? What is, yes. So, here is Pankajam in her retrospective essay on her 80th birthday. She's looking back in her life, and she says, who am I? I'm a woman who's utterly ordinary. I'm a woman who is a Sarva Sadharana Kudumba Penmani is how she writes about herself in Tamil. She writes in Tamil and English. The autobiography is entirely in English. So here is how she describes herself. 5 children, she had 5 children, their children, cows in the shed, managing a large complex household, and nursing and looking after her parents. Her mother and father for several years were ailing, so she was a caregiver to both of them primarily. Tied my nose down to everyday mundane things. So she's giving us an account of why she hasn't done much in her life as she saw it. She accomplished nothing, is how she writes about herself. This is a foreword to her autobiography, and usually somebody else writes the foreword, but this is a foreword that she writes, and she says, this is why I write the foreword. If you look at the slides, you can see what she says. I am not a woman of our time of national struggle. This is 1949, so you know whom she is talking about clearly. I am not a poet, a social worker, a society lady, or a great writer. I am a woman of no consequence at all, right? And in a sense, that explains the title of my book, Sreemathi. It's ironic. It's ironic.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
yeah, here is a sense of her handwriting. This is from her foreword. It's many, many pages like this that I found in that wooden box and in many other almiras at home and my other cousins' homes. And finally, this is also what she says, housework. She was a housewife, so keeps the soul fettered down. Why then I write is to show how my soul has been ever trying to soar up and break the bondage of the flesh. This
Yeah,
is,
here perhaps I need to fill in a few details about Pankajam, who was
Please.
born in 1911
Please,
and
please.
who had to drop out of school because her father didn't believe that the women needed to, read and write and go beyond a certain class. But here she is able to be articulate in English, and you would be surprised at her reading list, how erudite she was and what kind of an exposure she had. And if you were to see, she was a woman of great resolve. She sought friends outside of her culture. And she was born and raised to government officials in the British era. And her father was in the salt quotas. He was the inspector, and therefore merited a huge house. And she describes beautifully in Tamil or in English. In English, it's such a descriptive narrative, the parts that she writes about her growing up years in the salt quotas, how she could freely move about. I firmly believe, correct me if I am wrong, I firmly believe this house and the house in Eluru that her father got when he got promoted, both had physical setups which were absolutely free. Only one house and for acres of land with undergrowth or wild vegetation, sea on the one side. So do you think this physical setting kind of gave her the mental space to reflect upon her fate, her destiny, and also muster courage to change it?
I think so. I think what was also unusual about Pankajam was that she had very little constraints on her person or her movements when she was growing up. Her father was often away, like Sreemathi said, he was an inspector in the salt pans. It was called the Department of Salt and Customs. So he would go away on an inspection of the salt pans. But because he worked in the salt department, it meant that she and her mother and her little brother were growing up mostly in the coastal wilderness of the Coromandel coast of Madras Presidency. And that's why I have a slide there which gives you a map of Madras Presidency then. So the your mic is yeah.
She talks about as a young girl dunking into a pond and being missed at home, and then somebody coming to pick her up.
Yeah.
Pretty adventurous physically.
Absolutely. And her mother was also a very unusual woman who did not believe in restraining her daughter physically or otherwise.
I mean, she fought for women's education.
Well, yes. So the thing about Pankajam was that in a sense, my story is therefore about the making of this unusual woman. And physical space is certainly, as you very rightly said, Sreemathi, a part of it. And therefore, her descriptions in the book that I reproduce of the coastal wilderness of Madras Presidency weave together people, social relationships, the way a child looks at adults. a mother who's slowly coming apart, melancholia, a father's violence against a mother, all of it which is seen by a 5-year-old child, then an 8-year-old child, then a 10-year-old child. And just to add to her story also about education, Pankajam had no more than 6 years of school education, that was all. And even that school education was because her mother made a flight for freedom. She picked up her daughter when her father was away on an inspection of the salt pans, fled the coastal village, took off to Madras where she lived with her brother so that she could put her daughter in school. And 6 years of schooling before she was forcefully withdrawn against her wishes and tears to be married off at the age of 17. So schooling was a very, very precious and sadly limited experience.
Which was restricted only to some people at that point of time. So if I'm making a visual of where she grew up, exploration, adventure, taking accountability for oneself, were ingrained into her DNA because of the physical settings, perhaps. And of course, she had her mother, who was also very agentic, who was also taking responsibility to educate her daughter because against the will of her husband. So it's wonderful. The next question I've been really dying to ask is to the structure and the architecture of the book. The narrative is full of descriptions. But there are several temporal layers. So as a reader, you jump through chronology. Sometimes, you're back in Eluru. Sometimes you're talking about independence. Sometimes the Panchavati house, which came into being much later. Sometimes the accounts of her son. Sometimes the accounts of the mother. So there are different layers. One can argue definitely that it gives it a three-dimensional effect and it is intentional. Is it your conscious choice, or you just wanted to be loyal to all the sources that you found? And
so I think my answer to your question, Sreemathi, would be that what I was trying to do is to say that while she is my grandmother, I cannot make the claim that therefore what I say is the whole truth about her, because how does one know another person entirely, right? And I'm reconstructing a life, and I'm doing it by relying on different sources, right. Part of which is my memory of my mother's conversations with her mother, my memory of my conversations with my grandmother. But memory is notoriously unreliable. That's how memory works.
Yeah, in loops.
I'm pulling into this story her writing her autobiography, but also her autofiction, her stories that she wrote about herself as well. I'm also using letters that she wrote my mother when my mother spent 6 years in the US working and studying between 1963 and 1968. So I had all those letters to fall back on as well. And I think what I'm doing is to hold these sources together and provide an interpretation of how she lived and acted and thought. And I think there is in the book, I'd like to think, an open invitation to you as the reader. I hope all of you will be readers of my book, to agree or disagree with my interpretation of her life. Yeah, here's the book. It's outside as well. But you could also well disagree with the way in which I juxtapose, say, one source against another and say, this is why I believe she acted in the manner in which she did. Yeah. And I think I wanted to leave it open-ended because I wanted to make it an invitation to you to also look at how I'm assembling this from the various pieces of evidence that I have. Yeah. And those are disparate pieces of evidence. So pulling them together was an act, and I had to hold them together like that.
While you are on the process, I have two questions. But before that, just to fill the people who have not yet read the book on how Pankajam sets out to tell her own story. Firstly, a woman of great courage, because self-disclosure is not everybody's capability. In fact, psychiatrists say that self-disclosure, practicing psychiatry in India is tough because we have face cultures and we don't like to disclose, especially unhappy details about one's life, because we always want to preserve our honor and we have an aspirational image of ourselves that we'd like to project rather than what the truth is. Whereas Pankajam is daring enough or cussed enough, I don't know which of the two, to write about the gory details of the unhappiness that she suffered, the unfairness that she suffered. Directly. Two, where she fights shy, I think she has resorted to writing 3 different short stories where quite clearly she's the heroine. And quite clearly, later on, we get to know that the circumstances of the protagonist there are the circumstances that she lived through. So that's very, very interesting. But you yourself say the wooden box contained a lot of writings, a diary, some letters, some stories, some poetry, some in Tamil and some in English. And you, whereas you wrote the book in English, and my question to the process is, the Tamil writings were very intimate. They were, to Kalpana. I mean, they were preserved for her granddaughter. And she had written, they were outpourings of her feelings. But you wrote in English and brought them out into the public sphere. How was the process? How did you navigate the challenges of translating, transposing something that is so intensely personal in a vernacular language into a language that's not ours, and bringing it unpublicly consumable?
Absolutely.
Form.
So I think that was also the dilemma that, and I think Pankajam also grappled with the same dilemma in a sense that I grappled with when I was reading her writing, because she had her autofiction, and the autofiction is the fictionalized autobiography. So it is her story, but those parts of it, like you said, Sreemathi, that were unsavory, right? The parts of it that she could not speak aloud, because they still, for many, many women, are the unsayable parts of conjugal life, right? Of matrimony, of holy matrimony, as it were. So, those parts of it, then, she brings to life through the stories of Kamala, Lakshmi, and Meena. These Kamala, Lakshmi, and Meena are all Pankajam. So, this distancing strategy, Kamala's story is written in Tamil. It's called Vidiyum Madiyum, Fate and Intelligence, right? Meena's story and Lakshmi's story is written in English. And then there is a story called Ammavin Pirandanal, which is in Tamil. And I think for Pankajam, the question was, how can she say the unsayable? How can she write about conjugality, both, all of it, the suffering, the nasty parts of it? How can she be explicit, leaving pretty much nothing to the imagination? It's raw in its intensity. It was difficult for me to read, although I had known many parts of the story. Being her granddaughter, of course, she had directly told me. And yet, when I set out to write about her, I think the question was, do I really reveal these closets, these skeletons in the family closet? You know what they say about skeletons rattling in the closet, right? And it was a question of a choice. How much to say, how much not to say, what not to say. Then I realized that through the autofiction, she had said every damn thing and then some, right? So that really left me with no choice. If she had dared, how could I concede?
Yeah,
right?
that was also my next question to you as an anthropologist's nightmare, the dilemma of ethics. You stumble on precious data, but you don't have the explicit permission of the source. How ethical is it to use it to state your own ideology, your own philosophy, your own belief system in the public? So how did you negotiate that?
Yeah. So, yeah, you're right that it's an ethic. If, for instance, if she were alive today, how would she react to all of this being out? Not just the autobiography, not just her poetry, but then her autofiction as well. And I think, given that she was, by the time she had her stroke in 1994, so by that time she was reading pretty much all the modern Indian writing that was coming out in English. Then, if some of you remember here, Geeta Hariharan's book, 1000 Faces of Night, poetry and writing by women who were starting then. There was a lot of translation into English as well, starting to tell the truth about marriage and conjugality. And I think from wherever she is, she would have said, okay, you go girl. So that's the sense I have. And, but you're right in that one never quite knows. But I think what I did therefore is to say, the way I handle this is by saying, I think, and I show in my book, that nobody is a villain, not even the men in the story. Because the men who are pretty nasty pieces of work when it comes to their wives, as you commented, are men who are deeply tender and feeling fathers. So while they want their wives under their foot crushed there, they want their daughters to soar and reach for the skies.
See,
what do you make of that?
That's my question when we are critical of men. The question that came to me after reading this is, Pankajam's father, who was not so nice to Subbalakshmi, his wife, was also against Pankajam going to school beyond a certain thing. But when Pankajam, as a married young girl, is going through difficult times, be it a childbirth, be it financial difficulties, whatever it is, it was he who would, come forward and bail her out and take her away, pack her up, and take her to his house. That's a privilege that Pankajam enjoyed. Uh, that may be a privilege that people can hold against her, saying, okay, she's privileged, therefore she is able to write. But the other privilege of being literate and being self reflecting, being discerning individual, she owes it all to herself because she educated herself. And you should tell us a little bit about her friends, a little bit about the kind of books that she read, the poetry that she devoured, and what influenced her thinking so much. Because her role models those days in a patriarchal societies were fathers. I mean, they were leaders in their own right, yes, but in her case, her mother was also a leader. And yeah.
So I think something that I try to show in my book, Sreemathi, is about how this woman who still led her life largely within the confines of her kin and domestic arrangements, she didn't break out of it and explode the way Maithili, her daughter, did. Pankajam certainly didn't. But yet she managed to nurture and cultivate what she calls in one of her stories a kingdom of the mind. Right? A மனோராஜ்யம். தமிழ்ல வந்து எழுதும்போது மனோராஜ்யம் அப்படின்னு சொல்லுவாங்க. கற்பனை உலகம்னு சொல்ல மாட்டாங்க. இது வந்து ஒரு பழைய தமிழ் சொல். மனோராஜ்யம், a kingdom. That's why I call it kingdom of the mind. Yes, it's an alter universe. It's an alter universe she constructed through books, through reading everything. Philosophy, world history, classics, world classics, religion, science, spirituality, mathematics, chemistry, well, just about everything, right? So that was a parallel universe that she constructed, but that through one. The other was these unusual friendships that she cultivated across well, pretty much everything: religion, caste, community, language, race, etc. I talk about all of them in the book. So what she did was to see the world through others' eyes when she could not directly see the world because she was still physically trapped within her life.
Example is, tell us about Paxi.
I'll show you a picture. Yeah. Yeah. This way. Yeah, this one. Before this. So this is Paxi Thornhill. If you can all just take a look at this. Okay, who is this young woman? She was born in Sri Lanka to British parents, left with her parents when she was a very young child back to England. Paxi drove a van all by herself. She must have been, I don't know what, in her 20s, from England all the way through various European countries, and then Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Bombay, and finally landed up in Madras.
Paxi herself was,
she was
a kind of an assorted bag of many ideologies and thoughts.
Yes. And she lived in this van for that entire period. From 51 to 53, she was driving this van. She lived in this van, slept in it, ate in it. The van was her home. Right? And Paxi, when she came to Madras, was a woman who obviously shook up Madras society because she smoked a cigarette openly. She had a boyfriend who she was living with an Italian filmmaker she met in Madras.
You know, Kalpana, what I was just thinking is, this brand of freedom fascinated Pankajam. Very much late in life, she musters courage and money to travel to see her daughter, who was already in the US doing great work with the UN. And on the way back, all alone as a Mylapore Mami, she ventures out in, apparently, quote unquote, she uses the term something like that, to that effect. So she travels all alone in London, navigating the underworld and writing postcards saying this is the best tube system that I can think of. So she had an opportunity to live the brand of freedom that she envied or admired in people like Paxi. And here I want to say my admiration in Vidiyum Madiyum. She says how, her agency comes through. She says, don't succumb to your destiny. It's in your hands to carve out the destiny that you are aspiring to. And that's such a potent title, that's such an eloquent title. So I was just saying that sums up Pankajam's personality. Earlier we were talking about her father and then her husband, and we talked about her father who was different as a husband and who was different as a father. So are we making enough distinction? Are we discerning enough to say when some man is not so fair to a woman? Is it the gender? Is it the role? Is it the community? That nuancing, does it happen? I mean, the nuancing would have been easier if there were other micro histories recorded by women from other communities also. I was just thinking about if there is at all any such account of history around that time by a woman from another community. Maybe Telugu, maybe, of course, we had women leaders like Bengaluru Nagaratnamma, Muthulakshmi Reddy, we had Durgabai Deshmukh, so many people, but they were all out in the public space. Being in the microcosm of home, being married to an orthodox household, as a mother, as a wife, how did they carve out their destiny? It would be very interesting if we had some kind of a, do you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I could think of maybe, say, Adagiyanayaki Ammal, those of you who know her story, Kavalai. Of course, she's younger than Pankajam. She was born in 1925. Kavalai was published by her son, who was himself a writer and a novelist, and in which he talks again about family relationships, domestic life, the suffering heaped on women, how women can often feel belittled and diminished by their partners and not respected in social relationships. So there have been, and there continue to be, of course, there is a great deal of writing of women who are activists in the Ambedkarite movement from Maharashtra. In those cases, of course, they were Dalit women who were out in public movements, in social movements, often inspired directly by Dr. Ambedkar himself. So, but one therefore has, I mean, in a sense, there is a great deal of writing, women's writing, if you're interested in doing it. And but there's also at the same time a great deal of stories of women who are mothers and grandmothers, quote unquote, only, right? Like Pankajam keeps saying, I'm only a housewife. I'm a mere housewife. Who am I? And I think that resurrection, that resuscitation, that recovery of their voices and agency is a project that is still waiting to happen in many ways. And in a way, I hope that those who pick up my book and happen to read it, if in a way it reaches you and you feel inspired then to take up the story of some female ancestor that you know of, right? Then I think there's a point to having written this book.
Yeah, so many micro histories. Talking of that, it is so interesting how you interweave what's happening outside and what's happening inside Pankajam's household. Outside, there is this Japanese bombing that happens in Madras, which Pankajam records in her own words, and it's also retold by her son, if I'm not mistaken. And we get a glimpse of history through an individual's eyes who is not overtly a stakeholder outside of the house. I mean, every one of us was a stakeholder at that time. But she told a story, she was telling her story, and outside it was the freedom struggle. By juxtaposing these two histories, you very beautifully bookmark events, her own, difficulties with the challenges that the nation faced.
I think that was a conscious strategy, Sreemathi, that I was careful. I mean, I was not careful, but I was conscious that, see, the thing about Pankajam was that her writing is very self-reflexive. While on the one hand, she keeps saying, I'm a very ordinary woman, who am I? On the other hand, she is conscious that she is a subject of history, right? And she is conscious that the sheer ordinariness of her life must have some meaning somewhere in the grand scheme of things. So that self-reflexive tonality runs right through Pankajam's writing.
Personal is political.
And the personal, the biographical is social as well, right? So she witnesses the anti-colonial freedom movement. She witnesses changes in the great city of Madras, as she calls it, right? Which is always on the cusp of change forever. The Japanese bombing, the evacuation of the city of Madras. So I was very conscious to pull all these elements into my story, and I take it therefore right into the 1990s and obviously in the 1960s then. So I think what I was trying to do is to also pick up the idealism and the optimism of the Nehruvian years, right? The 50s and the 60s when Pankajam is raising her young family of 5 children. But then I also then comment on how that optimism seems to evaporate in the 1960s with all workers' movements, peasants' movements, women's movements, etc., bursting into the scene. And Pankajam's household is not untouched by all this because Maithili explodes within the household, right? Right? And she therefore transforms the face of her household as well.
Yeah, but you say that Pankajam's household was not a domestic space, but it's a political incubator. So can you give us a few examples as to how Maithili got inspiration from this household?
Well, that's a book that is still waiting to be written. I hope it'll be my next book where I'll reflect on that. But I certainly think, well, Maithili was growing up seeing somebody like Paxi Thornhill, witnessing the unhappy marriages of her own mother and her grandmother, Subbalakshmi. Maithili also wrote a book about Subbalakshmi, right? Yes. Which gave her the strong sense that marriage is not for me. So Maithili grew up with this, for many years, with this feeling that whatever you do to me, I won't let you get me married off, right? So that was, for a long time, Maithili.
What was Pankajam's take on it? She wanted her daughter to be married too, despite her own personal experience.
She wanted her daughter to find a man very unlike the one she had landed.
Right? And on her own accord, she said. Yeah, she should find a man on her own.
Yeah. And she was fairly certain. In fact, in one of her letters, she says that this is when Maithili, of course, is working in the UN, in the US. She says, I dare not choose for you. You will choose for yourself. Then occasionally she hints gently that Maithili seems to be doing nothing about choosing. So, could you get a step on it? Like that.
It's another thought that comes to me is that you say that much later in Pankajam's life, she and her husband, they build a house in Spur Tank Road. Yeah, and they name it Panchavati. And she says she spent a good amount of her lifetime, that is 57 years, in Panchavati. But the book doesn't speak that much about her life in Panchavati. The book is dominated by her life in early years in Eluru, and the way she talks about that Eluru had in the olden days, Kukkala Raju. She talks about a zamindar who had a passion for dogs, who had about 150 dogs of all breeds. He would bring them out in the evening for a walk, and very descriptive social history of the times. But none about Panchavati. Whatever you write about Panchavati seems to be more from her son and you and from you. So why do you think?
I think, in a way, all of us are haunted by our childhoods, no? And the landscapes of our childhoods. When I have vivid dreams, which I seem to have very often, it's always that Panchavati house where I lived also. From the time of my birth to the time I was 16 or 17 years old. And it's always the same old house. Of course, it's all warped the way it is in your dreamscapes. So I have a feeling that for each one of us, then, it's our childhoods that seem to haunt us. And her childhood, of course, was in, like I said, if you can imagine the Madras presidency. She's in Eluru, in Kakinada, she's in Ramanathapuram, she's in Pudukkotai, she's in Marakkanam, she's in Vayalur, she's in Ennur, right? She's in these locations where she's growing up amongst the salt pans, but also horses, dogs, jackals, snakes, birds, and insects. Yeah. And trees, right? And all of this weaves its way into her narrative. So, who can forget that?
I also feel perhaps that's what gave her the comfort of crossing cultures and, navigating different cultures, different thought systems, different ideologies. That ease of crossing borders comes from living with nature, living with different, animals, insects, without imposition. And suddenly she's married, and then she has to follow the domesticated routine, and she never really fitted the role from what I understand. I have one request to you. And she wrote poetry also, so that the people in the room can have a sense of her ability to write. Someone who dropped out after 6 years of schooling. Please, shall I read it out, or would you like to read it out?
You go ahead.
Yeah.
If you've noted the page.
Yeah. 1 second. School.
School is.
It's about her friend whom she cannot be at the school reunion because she's dropped out of the school. So she writes a poem. She says to my classmates, written in 1931, "My classmates and friends dear, if you haven't forgotten me just here, though my heart is fleet as light, my fate is surely slow of flight. So I cannot visit my alma mater on the old girls' day, but later. Schoolgirls, you're bubbling water, yeah, fond of mischief and full of laughter. Unhappily with school, I parted. Far away am I, sad hearted. They say, out of sight, out of mind. Do not observe that rule, be kind. Never from your heart a true friend tear, and all your thoughts nurse with care, till we meet again sometime, somewhere." This is so beautiful. I mean, for a woman who never really was schooled in English to be it's a different skill altogether. Okay, so we come to more or less, we are left with a few time for a few questions, but before that, I have a few rapid fire questions to you. You don't have much time to think. So, describe Pankajam in 2 words.
Fierce.
Okay.
Joyful.
All right. What was Maithili Shivaraman, the activist, like a mother?
Absent. Serious.
Okay. Who had a greater impact on your life, your mother or your grandmother?
My mother.
The most surprising item found in the wooden box?
Her autofiction.
Okay.
Nina story.
If you could have coffee with Pankajam in 1950, what would be one question you would ask her?
Why don't you leave it all and just run away?
Okay. Which language captures Pankajam's soul, Tamil or English?
Tamil.
If Pankajam went to college today, what would be her major?
Oh, science.
One object of hers that you will never ever give away to anyone.
All her writing.
Okay. Which book or author do you think influenced her the most?
Jane Austen, maybe? Pride and Prejudice or Jane Eyre.
So, in one word, your message to women of resistance lineage.
Oh, well, you have to live in the shadow of your female ancestors, as I live in the shadow of my great-grandmother, my grandmother, and my
Only
mother.
one word. Okay. So, will you still write a book on your mother?
Inshallah, I will.
Okay. Will you be leaving a wooden box for the next generation?
There is no next generation. I don't have a daughter. It ends with me.
No, it could be. No, it could be someone else. It could be my children, my grandchildren, to the next generation.
Certainly. To all of you.
Okay. So you have given us what you call the archive of the interior. In every woman here, if just imagine if every woman in this room were to start a wooden box today, how would history be seen tomorrow? As compared to history recorded by historians.
We would have such fascinating histories from below. We would have fascinating histories of the everyday. And who would be interested in war and politics anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think now the house is open for questions. There seems to be lots of questions.
Hello, ma'am. Actually, it was a wonderful session. From morning, I have been attending session. This is my first year visiting literature festival, but this session seems my favorite. What's my question is, you have said you have translated the Tamil stories, right? Like Madiyum Vidiyum, and one more thing you said, Ammavin Pirandanar. So, do you think that intents of Tamil you have translated in English? The originality of Tamil you have translated in English?
I hope I have, but I agree with you entirely. I can see where your question is coming from, because in Tamil, the intensity of emotion of writing itself and of emotional writing can be quite overwhelming. It can be very powerful. And Tamil as a language allows that, right? It lends itself to that intensity. I think I have done all right, I think, because I'm bilingual myself. I'm equally comfortable reading and writing and speaking in Tamil and English. And therefore, I think I didn't
No,
particularly...
for
the readers,
I'm
well,
asking.
that's for you to say, really. So I think I've sort of given it my best shot. Maybe at some point of time, there will be a Tamil translation of this book. If there is, I hope her Tamil writing can appear in the original. In which case, you know, you will sample that.
Thank you so much.
My question for you is, why do you speak about your mother and grandmother in first person, not Amma, Pati, which is what normally we refer to? And I'll ask my second question also quickly. Who bought her the books like Jane Austen and things like that? Was it the men in the house, or did it come from the women of the house? Because similar stories in our house, the men brought those books. So that's why I was asking.
Your second question first. Well, the English, actually, you're right, that the men did play a part in the books. She gets something called the books of knowledge, right? Which her father orders for her when he withdraws her. She cries and weeps, saying, "You pull me out of school. I won't ever be Pankajam SSLC." Then it was SSLC. So her father buys her 12 volumes of what is called the world's best books, which is literature and books of knowledge. He orders it from Calcutta. They're published by the Christian Literature Society from Calcutta, right? It's an American publication. I still have the books, by the way. But all the other books, I must say, her mother, Subbalakshmi, would often go to Madras University. She held a university card, although she'd never been to school. And there's something called the Higginbothams in Madras for old Chennai lovers, right? Higginbothams, Connemara Library, they all feature Madras University's library. They're all part of this book. So there has been a tradition of public and the Moor market, which would sell second-hand books at throwaway prices, which is also in this book. Those were the sources. And sorry, what was your question? Why do I call them? Well, because I have to think of them as... no. Why do I refer to them as Pankajam and Maithili, right? Because I have to. Because they are no longer my grandmother and my mother. They are these women I'm writing about. And I am a writer and they are my subjects. And I must have that distance from them in order to be objective, to be able to tell their story. It's not, I love my tata, right? My grandfather, right? But if he's tata in my head, I'll never tell the truth about him. So he becomes Sivaraman in the book.
Hi, ma'am. Over here.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so from the way you...
Yeah, you can come up a bit in front, yeah.
No, that's... It's,
Go on, please.
yeah, so from the way you described your grandmother, the parallel that I can draw is with, say, R.K. Lakshman's Common Man, but like for a more slice of life version of herself. And because you said she really enjoyed Jane Austen as well, I wanted to know how witty she was, how observational she was, whether she really got into the what we call mundane aspects, but like made them very interesting, considering you said that she wrote self-insert fiction about herself as well.
So that's the, thanks for that question. Actually, her autofiction is something that when you read it, I hope you'll also enjoy it. While obviously it was cathartic for her to write about it, it wasn't just an exercise in journaling or catharsis. It was, you can see very clearly it's a writer at work, right? Even if she doesn't, just stand up so you can see me. Even if she doesn't publish it, you can see that she loves the act of writing. So the description is rich, right? The language is quite beautiful. And the characters in her story, she herself is distancing herself from her husband, her father, her father-in-law. She is naming them, so-and-so, Meena, which means that she brings those characters to life. They are not one-dimensional either. Even her husband, who has done her a great deal of harm, is not a one-dimensional villain in her own story about him. And I think that's possible not only because of this distancing, by calling him somebody else in the book, but also because she is a writer, I think. So I think she has the gift of writing, of bringing character to life, of showing us their interior world. And she brings her characters to life through argument. She doesn't describe them to us. They argue with each other and therefore they come to life. So, She was. Certainly she was. She certainly was.
Mom, just a small addition to it. Did she like comics? Because
Well,
because again, tying back to, because I said she reminds me of Common Man so much. Do you think, did she like comics, or do you think she would have enjoyed it?
she wrote a very comic piece on a trip she made with a company of Bengali ladies, none of whom spoke any word in common with her because they didn't share a language, to Ajanta and Ellora caves. That's amongst the funnier bits in the book. You can take a look at it. But no, she didn't. She wasn't. I mean, she did have a great gift and a capacity for joy, and humor and laughter was part of that.
Thank you.
Thank you for the amazing session, ma'am. I just had a quick question. After reading your grandmother's story, is there anything you would like to say for the first generation of resistors?
Well, I would say that the book is out there. She's no longer just my grandmother. She won't haunt me. She'll haunt all of you. Right? So I think one way to deal with having this grandmother is to kind of put her in her place by writing about her, right? Because then all of you can pick it up and then you can deal with what it means to have a woman like that who is also part of your legacy, not just mine, right? And then it's out of my head, it's inside yours.
Just one more question, I
Hi.
think.
I just wanted to ask, do you have an wooden box yourself? Do you have an wooden box?
I don't need a wooden box. I have social media and email, and I have a laptop and a desktop. What do I need a wooden box? In fact, I've forgotten how to write by hand.
One question from a gentleman would be very nice. If there is anybody who's willing
Hi,
to.
ma'am.
Oh.
So, I'm a first year student at Stella. My name is Aparajita, and I have a question for you. So, I feel that I'm a woman and I'm a feminist. I feel that everybody needs to be one. And I have complete agency over every single life decision that I make, whether my parents approve it or not. And I am ready to go against the tide and speak up. But there is also a part of me, I feel cognitive dissonance, a part of me that wants my parents to approve it, and I want to make my parents get on board with me. I want to be within the system, but when the system is like, sometimes it traps you, you're not able to come out of it. And when you go against it, the system corners you and tells you that you're wrong. You're framed as arrogant, outspoken, too much. But at the same time, you know what you're fighting for is right. At the same time, you don't want to make your parents upset and you want to make them happy because you love them. This is something that's constantly going on in my mind like a noise. What advice would you give me?
Well, I think it's something that I would share with you. I think it's something Pankajam would share with you. All of us would share. All of us would share. There is this longing to belong, longing to have a community, longing for validation. None of us are a stranger to any of this. At the same time, actually, it's very interesting. There's a section in the book called The Tyranny of Love, in which I'm also saying that one way to kind of tyrannize women is not by beating them or starving them, but by withholding affection and withholding approval, right? And if a man or a romantic partner, potential boyfriend or potential partner or partner of either sex in your life is withholding affection, then it becomes a form of tyranny, right? And women, maybe in Pankajam's case, who are striving for intellectual growth, can also feel wounded. Right? When the insecure men in their life, like in Pankajam's life, withhold affection as a way of punishing them. So it's complicated. How did she deal with it? That's Pankajam's path. See, she would never tell you, you do this. She would only say, this is how I dealt with it with all my imperfections and with what I knew. And that's all I can ever tell you.
Excellent answer. I was just thinking the freedom and the compulsion to want to belong are two opposites which are non-divorced from each other. They are two sides of a coin in our community. Reconciling the two coins is perhaps the vidhi, but the Madhi will tell you how to reconcile it. So thank you very much for bringing Kalpakam out of the shadows for us. I think we can have one more question, one last question.
Hi, I think I'm going to bug you. So thank you so much for the session and thank you so much for the book. I think it's slightly repetitive, the question, but I still take the chance and ask if there's one particular quality about Pankajam that you think feminists of today can imbibe or carry forward. What do you think that quality is?
I would think that it's a rich inner life, no? Her mind was extremely, it was such a reserve of imagination that she was very, very internally tremendously strong. And it's a capacity for joy as well. I think as feminist fighters, however we define ourselves, I mean, just be joyful, right? I would say it's important, of course, to stand up for what you believe in, but it's equally important to never give up on joy. And she was very fierce about being joyful. And I think be fierce, but be joyful, like that.